joining us. So I get back to my question then. What can Israel actually achieve? The Lebanese president is talking about a buffer zone. He says what Israel is doing shows us that they want to take southern Lebanon as a possible buffer zone between them and their enemies, Hezbollah. Is that what you foresee, an extended period of time during which Israel just keeps southern Lebanon empty as a buffer zone?
Yes, this is also declared by the Israeli, which is to empty a certain region, not only to create a buffer zone, but to displace all of its population without allowing them to return and to demolish their villages in order to have what the Israelis called, in fact, earlier in the 80s, their security zone. Today they can use other terms, but it's the same principle: destruction, displacement, and occupation. What changes, however, is the rise of the right wing in Israel that is openly talking about annexation, about possible expansion of the Israeli borders, or about the non-return of displaced population, which will create in Lebanon a huge crisis, economic one, political one. It will lead to tensions. And I think this is also an Israeli objective, pretending that they are just weakening or taking Hezbollah as their target and pushing it away from their border. They are, in fact, destroying large parts of the country and creating a sustainable instability that will only keep the whole region under the current, state of war, of military operations. And the question of international law is being totally marginalized, despised, and the Israelis are violating it on a daily basis.
Ziad, the Lebanese government actually wants Hezbollah disarmed. They have banned Hezbollah's military activity, but they can't fully enforce that ban. So is there an argument to say that Israel is doing the Lebanese government's dirty work here?
No, definitely not. Israel is destroying villages, bridges, infrastructure, killing more than 1,000 persons until now in Lebanon, and displacing 1 million. What the Lebanese government was supposed to do is a gradual disarmament of the party, which is also something that many Lebanese would like to happen. However, it cannot happen while Israel is bombing. And not only now, between November 2024, when the ceasefire agreement was signed, and March 2nd, 2026, when Hezbollah contributed to the Iranian effort to enlarge the scale and the fronts of the war, Israel violated the ceasefire for more than 10,000 times, according to the United Nations. So under bombing, under assassinations, under military pressure, the government was not capable of fulfilling the whole mission. Nevertheless, it did start, and there were lots of achievements in that policy. And Hezbollah, as part of the government, was witness and accepted that, even if, and that's why the government made its activity illegal after March 2nd, it was preparing, in a way, to the case of a regional war in which it will take part. So there is a Lebanese question here, and there is a Lebanese problem, yes, but it is the Lebanese state that should deal with it, with Hezbollah, and we cannot say that Israel is doing the dirty job, because it's doing it, if we accept that argument, through destructions, war crimes, and through creating in Lebanon a situation that will definitely lead to long-term instability, and might need as well to a change in the demography, geographically speaking, since hundreds of thousands of people will not be able to return to their homes and to their villages, to their towns, if Israel occupies illegally parts of southern Lebanon.
Yeah, more than 1 million people have already been forced out of their homes because of this conflict. Now, the population of Lebanon is 5 to 6 million people, depending on estimates. So we're looking at 20% of the population that have already been uprooted in 3 weeks alone. Ziad Majed, we'll speak again. Thank you very much. Now, nearly 1 in 5 people in Lebanon have been forced from their homes since Israeli attacks escalated earlier this month. Now, the National Theater is helping displaced young people deal with the trauma of war. They're taking part in workshops that combine acting with personal testimony. About 120 people are now sheltering in national theater branches in Beirut, Tripoli, and Tyre.
In the play, as you see, they are telling their stories, they are expressing their pain, those who lost their homes, those who lost family members, those who were displaced, how they suffered on the road and how they ended up in shelters. The work is a collection of different portrayals of what happened in Lebanon.
Air raid sirens were activated in Bahrain and Kuwait a short while ago. Both countries have come under Iranian attacks nearly every day since the war began. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates also reported that they had intercepted drones and missiles on Monday. At least one person was injured by shrapnel in the United Arab Emirates. Al Jazeera's Zain Basravi is in Dubai monitoring the entire region. Zain, the Iranian IRGC is warning that if the U.S. attacks its power plants, it will respond in kind. What are the risks for Gulf countries?
Well, the risks are very real. What would have seemed impossible perhaps 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, all of those taboos have been lifted, especially since we saw those attacks on energy infrastructure, oil and gas installations in the GCC. Iran retaliated after its gas field was hit. So in terms of targeting infrastructure, that seal has been broken, so the threat is real. And now what people here are concerned about, no doubt what governments are concerned about, are attacks on their power plants and their desalination plants. Iran has shown that it considers these areas to be fair targets because of the fact that they host U.S. bases. Now, whether or not you disagree or agree with that, the reality is that now power plants and desalination plants, crucial to the functioning of GCC cities, are considered to be under threat. Now, what does that mean? If there was some kind of attack, disruption would be severe, and it would be quick, and it would be immediate. The cities here have limited water supplies. 90% of some of the city's water comes from desalination, and there are integrated facilities, so power plants that also produce desalinated water. That is the majority of what functions out here. So an attack on any one of those would immediately likely see water shortages, economic disruptions, public health risks. They are on the coast, they are large facilities, they are relatively easy targets because of the proximity to Iran. Perhaps the only country that has a relative safe protection because of geography is Oman. It's a little further away, but Oman has regularly come under attack since this conflict began as well. There's also the GCC Interconnection Authority. What that is a fancy word for an organization that helps to share electricity. So these countries, their power grid is interconnected. An attack on one site could easily impact multiple countries, multiple cities. And what we are seeing over and over again in this part of the world, in this conflict, with these countries that are stuck in the middle is, this is an ecosystem. If you look at the GCC, if you look at these cities as an ecosystem, you know, they don't have water tables, they don't have a great deal of natural water supply, but they're rich in resources, so they're able to resolve that logistical problem. They're able to create these plants where they can process water, they can make these cities functional, but any disruption has an immediate and a big impact to the people living here. So what we are seeing is the threat to these plants, no doubt something that governments here are taking seriously, something that they will be trying to mitigate, and really it is going to be a stressful 24 to 48 hours with this Trump deadline about opening the Strait of Hormuz. And what has become clear and evident to the governments here since the war began, we're into the fourth week now, if Iran says it's going to do something, it generally follows through. So the threat, the risk to plants here, power generation, water desalination, that is very real and could have very immediate, long-lasting impact if they do come under attack.
Zaina, I want to tap into the last 3 weeks of your reporting for something else. U.S. Central Command, which is carrying out all the military operations against Iran, says that Iran is no longer capable of launching large volumes of missiles and drones. They're down more than 90% according to CENTCOM, and Iran is now down to launching just 1 or 2 missiles at a time. You've been monitoring these attacks on the Gulf since the beginning. What are you seeing?
It is true, yes, Iran is degraded, but that doesn't mean that they're not dangerous. You know, listening to these CENTCOM reports, and Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, the generals that speak on behalf of Epic Fury, all of them really, it harkens back to a time of when they would talk about Afghanistan, the war in Afghanistan, 20 years, one of the most technologically advanced militaries, was pushed out over time. Vietnam, the numbers of Viet Cong killed in action became a benchmark for the generals back during that war as a sign of success. But that conflict didn't go the way the United States had hoped it would or professed it would to its public. Both were military defeats, and largely because the assessment of how the war was going was based on metrics that were perhaps not the right metrics to go by. And they may be making that same mistake when it comes to Iran. Yes, Iran's the number of launchers, the number of drones it has, drone factories, production facilities for missiles, all of that has been degraded. But we have to ask ourselves, what is Iran's primary weapon here? It isn't necessarily the materials of war that they're using, it is the strategy of disruption, disrupting airspace in the region, disrupting naval vessels, disrupting the free flow of the Strait of Hormuz and thereby other waterways around it. And it does not take a great deal of weaponry to do that. You can do that with 1 or 2 missiles. You can do that with a handful of drones. We've seen that in recent weeks. A number of attacks in the GCC are observably down, but at the same time, the disruption remains. It is logistical, it is economic, and it persists. And what we're looking at likely going forward is the attacks as they are ongoing in the GCC, although in less volume and less frequency, they're still being carried out almost on every country, every major place that's been targeted continues to be targeted, and that disruption continues to have an impact. Now, you don't need thousands of drones or missiles to continue to do this over a long period of time. So what we are seeing Iran do is step away perhaps from these shock and awe large salvos and go to a place where they are carrying out a war of attrition. Now, is the risk less? Maybe so, but it doesn't mean that long-term the risk doesn't remain. And the longer this war carries on, the likelier the chance of something getting through. Now, we have to go to one more point I'd like to make. The risk then, before the war started, to the risk now that Iran poses to regional security. Whatever CENTCOM says, whatever the messaging, the reality is that before the United States and Israel launched these attacks on Iran, there wasn't this level of disruption. Iran didn't pose a geopolitical or geostrategic risk in the region or broadly on the international stage that it does now since it started retaliating. So whatever the CENTCOM messaging, this is still a war of the US and Israel's making, and what happens going forward will depend on how long this war goes on.
Zain Basravi reporting from a foggy Dubai this morning. Thank you very much, Zain. You're watching Al Jazeera, a reminder of the latest developments in the U.S.-Israel war in Iran. Iran has threatened to lay sea mines across the Gulf if the country's southern coasts or islands are attacked. It's also threatening the indefinite closure of the Strait of Hormuz.